Do you find yourself making the same mistakes over and over? Repeated patterns in our relationships, in our eating habits, and our lack of motivation to exercise? It's normal. We're creatures of habit. 3 ways to stop making the same mistakes. So my last video was giving myself a pixie cut, which turned into a buzz cut. Do you want to feel? It feels really good. How in the world does that relate to making the same mistakes over and over or repeating patterns in your life? I can tell you, I was so excited to learn this. So what I had done in that video was I had stopped it and I identified what mistakes I was making while I was doing the pixie cut, which turned out to be a buzz cut. And I realized that those mistakes that I was making while I was cutting my hair are the same mistakes that I make in real life. And that relates to something that Richard Rohr had said. He had said that how we do one thing is how we do everything. And I always wondered about that. Like, is it really true that how I do one thing, such as giving myself a pixie haircut, is how I do everything? And in stopping that video and identifying the mistakes I was making, I was like, yeah, that is how I do everything. I was enthusiastic and I'm curious and I'm not scared of how things turn out because I know that hair grows back and things sort of just right themselves even if they go topsy-turvy. But I also notice that I go really fast. Like I tend to rush through things and I don't stop and read the instructions or think through what I'm doing. For instance, even in making videos, I don't do a script or think too much even about what I'm gonna say. I just sort of just do it and then later go up and clean up the mess. And this directly relates to learning how to stop making the same mistakes over and over. So these repeated patterns that we fall into, whether it's eating too much or drinking too much or spending too much money, gambling, the self-awareness, the ability to identify how we do one thing is how we're doing everything can help us learn how not to make the same mistakes over and over. If you can do something like record yourself doing something, it can be something that you were doing for the first time, or it can be something that you have done many times, like cook dinner, but you're trying a new recipe or you're trying something new. Record yourself doing it and look back and see if you can identify things that you do a lot or often. And if you can't really do this or you find a hard time looking at yourself, which is really common, it's really normal. I know I did not want to make YouTube videos and I did not want to see, I don't like going back to my old videos. The last thing I want to do is look at how I sounded and what I said yesterday, much less a couple years ago. But it is so important and it's so good for growth. But if you don't want to do it, what you can do is ask someone that you trust to look at it with you or even to look at it on their own and give you feedback. So ask them, how I did this one thing, is it how I do everything? Like, do you notice certain common traits that keep coming up? What they see or what you see is how you are in real life. The second thing to remember when you're trying to stop repeated patterns is that you actually have more control than you think if you know yourself. So for instance, I know how I approach new situations. I know that I'm very curious and I go very fast and I'm very impatient and I'm happier to clean up a mess than I am to start well. Whether that's good or bad is not the point. The point is knowing what your personality traits are or your weaknesses and your strengths and being able to stop yourself from falling into the same old patterns when you're, for instance, meeting a new person, or if you're sitting down tearing open a bag of potato chips, or if you're walking your dog and you feel that impatience rising up. If you know what you're prone to do, you're more likely to be able to stop it before it gets too far. You become more aware. And there is so much to be said for just being aware of what your habits are. My third tip on how to stop making mistakes is related to something I heard Eckhart Tolle say today on a podcast. When you find yourself falling into old patterns and making the same mistakes, you might be swept up in sort of the energy or the mood or the attitudes of the people around you. If at work you're in a meeting and you find yourself just falling into the same old trap of reacting the way you always did, it's possible that you're just caught up in the energy or the culture of that situation. And being aware of that is crucial. So, for instance, if you're an overeater, just know that when you sit down in front of the TV or your computer with a bag of chips, that energy is going to sweep you away into overeating. And I hadn't realized that. I actually had a talk with a friend last night, and I found myself judging her, as I actually often do with this particular friend. I just tend to get wound up and anxious when I talk to her. And then when Eckhart Tolle said that about getting caught up in energy, I was like, wait a minute, it's my responsibility because I do allow myself to get caught up into the judgment, but it's also the energy that's emanating from her that is sweeping me along. And once I realize that, like if I can be aware of the energy of the people around me and bring my own essence and my calmness and my bald head to it and my laughter and my joy, then I'm less likely to get caught up in their energy. So those three things. Number one is trying to identify your patterns. The second thing is just to be aware of it. Just notice when you're falling into the same old patterns and know that you can choose to not be falling into the same old patterns. And the third thing is just to be aware of the energy of the situation. Take good care of yourself because you are worth taking good care of. Mwah. Do you want to feel? It feels really good. But don't look because there's the bald spot. No, I'm kidding. You can look. I don't mind. I just won't look. Whoosh.